Do you love the freedom of being able to play any sort of character in any sort of world in TTRPGs? And that's the part that you love most, especially stories that are incredibly character driven where they are the focus. You'll probably love the game that we are talking about today on the RPG Goblin, which is Fate Core. Now, this system is referred to as a generic system because it doesn't have a base setting to it. You can literally play any kind of story that you so desire in this system, whether it be superheroes or space pirates or Victorian era drama. It can literally run anything as long as it focuses on the characters and who they are versus what they can do. It's such an amazing game, and if you love super heavy character and story-driven games, it's the perfect system for you. In this episode, I brought on Curtis to be my guest, who you may recognize from the 10 Candles episode, and we just had a blast. So, let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the RPG Goblin. I'm your host, Willow, and today we are going to be talking about Fate Core, which I'm very, very excited about, and I'm even more excited because I'm bringing on Curtis today as a guest, and you would know who Curtis is if you have listened to the 10 Candles episode, which is, by the way, fantastic. But before we get started into the actual game, I would love if Curtis, if you could introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Curtis. I am executive producer over at 5%Chance. We are basically an RPG production group. We bring on folks with different games, different stories, and help share stories with folks that don't necessarily have a lot of the technical acumen. We help produce things and get stuff up on Twitch. Most of our stuff is up on Twitch, twitch.tv/5%chance. We also have a whole YouTube backlog of actual plays. We're trying to branch out into fun different systems, and as a systems junkie, I really enjoyed coming on and talking about 10 Candles for probably longer than I needed to. So I have notes this time. This one will be hopefully shorter than 2 hours and 42 minutes like the last one was.
Fingers crossed. Absolutely. So, Fate Core.
Yes.
This is a very interesting system as it's, I think, our other than the Fate Accelerated episode that will be coming out before this, it is the first big generic system that we're actually talking about on this podcast. And if you would like to explain what a generic system means in the TTRPG community, I would
100%.
love for you to do that.
Yeah, so generic system, setting agnostic, there are a lot of different ways to phrase it, but basically it's here is a rule set. Here are the pillars of how this game functions, and you can put any kind of set dressing you want to put on those. So it's like you're not necessarily locked into a swords and horses fantasy. You can go, you're not locked into cyberpunk. And hopping on my soapbox for like 90 seconds, this is a lot of folks try to take D&D because it's the system they know and adapt it into cyberpunk, into Star Wars, into something, trying to make the rules work because they know the system. Fate is a system that goes, we don't care what you do because the rules are strong enough where they matter, but they're flexible enough that you can tweak things on the fly. And it's a very forgiving system because the rules are fairly stripped back and simple. And like you talked about with Fate Accelerated, they've even found ways, Evil Hat, the publishers of this, have found a way to make it even simpler. And
it's so insane. It's amazing.
There's Accelerated, there's Condensed, and then the core system is like their biggest, chunkiest book. But it has all the rules you can kind of think of. And it's also, I love setting agnostic games and like generic systems because it teaches like parts of the game. It's not like, hey, here's the history of elves in Faerun, or here's, welcome to Star Trek. Here's the history of the Federation. It's less about the mechanics. It's less about the pages and pages of backstory and lore on this universe. It goes, hey, you want to build your own universe? Here are the questions you need to answer. And they have done a phenomenal job of building toolkits for for different sorts of things, which we can get to a little later on in this because I don't want to lose the thread.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, I mean, you make a good point because generic systems basically just open up the world for you to create the story. There is nothing preset. Nothing preset. It is whatever story you and your players are wanting to play. And I think that's a good segue into, in the Fate core system, the biggest, most important part is the collaborative world building and character creation, I would say.
Yes. Yeah. It has one of the most it's very cooperative, and as far as what I've really gotten into, Monster of the Week has similar things with that, where it's like when you are building the story, something I always run into in my games is someone is like, oh, I'm new to the group, I'm a stranger. And it's really hard to get a stranger to engage in the world that you're making, or like why, two players are best friends and one's just this random third person to bring along. How do you make sure everybody gets involved and stays involved? Yes. And the character creation and all of that is so baked into getting into the, not even worrying about like, what are my stats? What am I good at? What am I bad at? It is building purely from like building this character from idea to character from start to finish. Just how do you start so simply with really your there's two core components to your character. There is your high concept and there is your, I believe it's trouble. Is that what they call it?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Your high concept and your trouble. If you were to take your NP, take your character and put him in a pot, stick him on the stove on low and let him simmer for hours, what do you come back to? You come back to just this pure undiluted, this pure concentrated essence of this character. And what is that? If you had to describe this character in one word, and the cipher system kind of does this as well in character creation, where it's like, I am an adjective, noun, who, verbs, is sort of that character creation thing. That's a different episode.
Of course. It just I was gonna say, it helps you get a very basic and very kind of clear idea of the character you are wanting to play without having to overthink anything at the start. You can just like, okay, I want to play a person with a sword. I want to play a strong woman with a sword. And that is your basic idea. And then from there, as you're building, it's going to become bigger and bigger and bigger. Though, before we talk too much about character creation, I want to ask, would you say it's more important to talk about the creation of the characters or the creation of the world first?
Oh God, that's such a hard question, because I love building both directions. I love building top down. I love building bottom up. Top down, taking this big, huge, like great big question. Like, I can't even think of one right now. Like that sort of like Star Trek. What if we lived in a post-scarcity utopia in space? That is like, what does the world look like? And then tunneling down and finding places where your players find something interesting that they want to step into those shoes. Or what do you want to play? What do you want to play? What do you want to play? Take those three characters, those three like big high concept ideas, and then shape a world around them. Because with Fate, you can kind of go either way.
You really can, and it's baked in either way as well, where it's like you can create the world first and then the characters, characters to world. You can do it whichever order you want. Then I'd say if we are already talking about character creation, let's go that way first. Okay. Give some kind of ideas, and then we can kind of go into the world afterwards and how you can structure it around the ideas you have, or the ideas that your players have for your characters, or you have for your characters that then you can give to the GM and make it a actual idea. And
go, hey, here's in all these stories that you're kind of looking at. So like, like you were talking about, you were like, what is my character concept? Like, if I had to tell you my character in a single sentence, a strong woman with a sword, that's a perfectly good high concept. This is who this character is. This is who she wants to be. You could also do something with like strong woman with a sword for hire, and you add a little more of you can add in like, this is my job, and that's a perfectly valid concept. You can throw in,
just a little bit more into the actual
Add a little
idea.
flavor, add a little bit of a relationship, like
Mhm.
exiled strong woman with a sword for hire. Like throw in an adjective, run through the thesaurus, pick your favorite adjective, slap it on your character, and it adds a little morsel to that. It gives you something. It gives your GM something to go, ooh, you're exiled. Let's focus. Why are you exiled? Who exiled you? And that starts building out the world around it.
Yes, because any word, anything that you add into your high concept or aspects that we will be talking about later, any of that can be used and picked apart as tools for the story,
Correct.
for other characters, for relationships, all of that. So as much information as you can get into like a single sentence
hmm
is
and
really, really useful.
yeah, and giving suggestions. It doesn't you don't have to have all the answers. In fact, that is
Absolutely.
frowned on. You don't want all of the answers to all of your questions
Hmm.
because that's something where like say exiled. Let's exiled strong woman with a sword. You don't need to know why you were exiled. Your character can just keep it quiet. Maybe you were exiled from a location and then you and the GM can figure out privately who kicked you out, what got you kicked out, and sort of build out into that. And that kind of feeds into the trouble, which is the other part. This is a negative is it's hard to call it a negative, but it is a
It's something that will cause you more trouble than good most of the time.
what makes your life complicated,
Exactly,
right?
yes.
Like if it's something with magic, you're like, oh, I'm a great spellcaster, but I don't have strong control of my magic. Like there is something that can go wrong.
Hmm.
And it's
Strong
something that,
woman with a sword that's exiled, you could be getting hunted down by whoever exiled you. Maybe you are a criminal in that place and that's why you were exiled.
yeah, your criminal past haunts you. You made powerful enemies is
Mhm.
such like, because again, you want those to be short. You want that to be like, if this sentence shows up and someone's like, yeah, I've made powerful enemies, that immediately sends your brain going like, who are these people? How powerful are they? Are they going to come after me because they're friends with me?
Mhm.
And how does this stretch? How does this expand and build into the world? And these are like you'd said the A word earlier, you aspects. And there's part of the thing that I love about Fate and why Fate is so flexible is because it goes, hey, here are these things that your character is. These are core components of your character. These are core components of the story you all are telling. And there is a meta currency. There is a thing that exists sort of above the game that the players are aware of that you can start exchanging between the players and the GMs. But we'll get to that in a couple of minutes. So yeah, we'll stick with our strong woman with a sword example. Has powerful enemies. Or if you want to get more specific, has made powerful enemies with with the black knives. Okay, well now who are the black knives? What do they do? And why did you piss them off? And that sort of, again, looping into that collective world building starts to step forward. So once you have those two big aspects, your high concept and your trouble, and something they bring up in this book, they talk about the bright side of a trouble, like why that's so good. It is something that has made your character stronger in some way. It is not necessarily entirely a bad thing. It could be something like you have an addiction. You have something that you have to try and overcome daily. But that has
Exactly.
made you
It's something to
stronger
make
in a
your
way.
lives more interesting.
Yeah, more and a little sometimes more tragic, but also something that the GM can reward you for the strength that it takes to get through that trouble.
Yes.
And sort of extending that out a little bit into how that has changed you as a person.
Absolutely.
Or hypothetical not person. Because again, there are no rules for race. There are no rules for gender. There are no rules. You don't even have to be human. Like, you could all be dogs. You could run a Fate game where you're all puppies. And once we get into the skills and stuff like that, you can kind of shape that how you will. But again, there are basically, you can say no. The only person who can say no, we can't do that, is somebody at your table. The game says do whatever the hell you want, as long as everyone's cool with it.
Yeah, just it's all just coming up. Again, it's pure just imagination and coming up with a story, maybe pretty much on the spot, because I don't know how much they, at least from what I've read and how I would approach the game, I don't know how much I would plan before saying, let's play a game of Fate, because it is so tied into being collaborative. If you plan for anything beforehand, I don't think you're going to do the game any sort of justice.
Mhm.
Um,
Are you saying that as a GM or as a player?
I think I think as a player, I would at least start getting some ideas of a character in mind.
Mhm.
And as a GM, I would maybe start like thinking of some like story aspects, but I would do that along with my player or with my GM, depending on which role I'm in, so
Yeah.
that everyone is coming to the table and ready to kind of make like all on board for the same type of story, because
Yeah.
that is what Fate is being on board for the same type of story, whether you want to play a space opera and a story based in the apocalypse, based in space, sci-fi, like all of that, you
You
are
could
all on board for the same story.
you could absolutely run. And I think there's actually an example of it in the book where they talk about running a like Victorian high society party
Oh yes.
in Fate, like full telenovela drama, like romance novel kind of plot.
Mhm.
And honestly, I feel like that's the folks at Evil Hat flexing and being like, you can do whatever the hell you want with our system. Look, it works. Um, just here is the biggest sandbox. Here's all the tools you could use. If you don't want to use some of those tools, that's fine. You don't need them. You don't need any of
Mhm.
those. You could just play with what you want to play with.
Exactly. It's so great. Though I would love to start getting into. So we've covered the high concept and the trouble.
Yes.
As you are making your character, you get what are called aspects, which are things that describe your character, like personality, quirks, items that they have, things like that,
Mhm.
important things. But they're called aspects, and these are basically, if you have played D&D, you can think of it more like an ability. Like these are your quote unquote abilities, but it's more tied into who your character is versus what they can do.
Mhm.
And in Fate, you get 5 aspects total, correct?
I
Or at
believe you
least at
might
the
be able to get
beginning.
more. And you can have up to 5 because there's something funky with refresh. Hold please. Let me triple check so I make sure I'm saying this correctly. Um, but yeah, like the aspects are the core of the game. They are the
Mhm.
core skill component that you really have going on. Um, I think you might get a re. Those are stunts. I'm thinking of stunts rather than aspects. So
Mhm.
aspects you do, and like stunt and aspect. A lot of these words should have an invisible capital letter in front of them.
Mhm.
Um,
Yes.
so yeah, you have your high concept and your trouble are aspects, and then you have 3 additional. So yes, you are correct with
Yes.
5.
All right. And so like we already covered, the high concept and the trouble, those are 2 of the aspects. And then the 3 other aspects in the game are actually done through relationship building and like a little bit of backstory building as well. And I personally love the way that they do this. And I would love, because you have actually, I don't know if we didn't clear this up before. Have you run Fate or just played in Fate, or have you done
I
both?
have done both. I have double dipped.
Okay,
I
perfect.
I try
Perfect.
not to when people are like, "Hey, I want to talk about a game." I try to be like, "Here, I've like sitting on both sides of the table
Yeah, have double
is
both
absolutely mission
experiences.
critical in something this flexible." Because
Absolutely.
this game pushes your improv button and your ability as a storyteller to find the important bits in what you just said and make them matter, because
Absolutely.
those come in those are their own aspects in an interesting way. um so yeah, you're building characters. You end up doing you pick so we've developed we should name the strong woman with a sword so we're not just saying strong woman with a sword every time we come
um,
back to her. um
First name that came to mind, Vanessa.
Vanessa, perfect.
Vanessa.
So Vanessa, strong woman with a sword, has made powerful enemies.
Yes.
So you playing Vanessa, you come up with sort of the basic details of your first adventure, right? Your first step out into the world. Doesn't have a lot of detail, like 1 or 2 sentences. Less is more in this case, because you want to give your other players room to insert themselves and make themselves part of your story.
Absolutely.
So you have a dilemma. It's something that makes your high concept and trouble work for you, because this is where those are really your only 2 quote unquote abilities you have. So Vanessa, strong woman of the sword, maybe she's working for the Black Knives, and then she ended up releasing, letting somebody go that witnessed a crime. So she's working with a crime syndicate. Somebody saw a crime and she didn't chase them down and murder them with her giant sword.
And then that became a problem.
And that is your cool. There's your trouble. And then with that, you kind of come up with the aspect from that story. Why did Vanessa let this person go? Was it a child? Was it someone who looked like her sister or her brother? Was it a priest? Was it someone that she couldn't do harm to?
Did she originally not want to be a part of the Black Knives and was trying to find a way to get out?
Right. Maybe, it's something just really core to that aspect. Like not cut out for a life of crime would be a great aspect. And so you kind of come up with that, you write it down. And you put that on an index card. Also, as far as materials you need for this game, whole buttload of index cards, a bunch of Sharpies, and some
every
D6s.
one that you can get.
Every index
every
card you can
one.
buy from. Take every index card they sell at your local Staples. If you don't have a local Staples, move somewhere that does.
Because you'll need it.
You will absolutely need them. Or don't buy Staples. Shop local. Find a local print shop.
Exactly.
So then you take that card. So Vanessa, let's do not cut out for crime. So you take that card and you slide it over to the other player at your table, and they can do one of 2 things. They can complicate the situation and make it a little, maybe that person, maybe player 2 or character 2, we'll call him Jonathan. So maybe Jonathan was that person. Or Jonathan, he was the person that Vanessa couldn't chase down and keep quiet. Or maybe Jonathan's a member of the Black Knives who sort of stepped in and assisted. And Jonathan has the opportunity to add himself into the story and either complicate it or solve it or do a mix of both.
Indeed.
And
it should always be a supporting role as well, correct? You don't want to be the center of what you are adding to this story.
This is about Vanessa's story rather than Jonathan's. Yes. Jonathan becomes an NPC, becomes a secondary player. Because Jonathan has just written his own tragic or his own first adventure and passed that over to Alexis.
Marie.
We'll go with we'll go with Marie. Yeah. So he passed his card over to Marie, and Marie is putting herself in as sort of this supportive or complicating NPC in that story. And then
pretty much every person is getting one of these cards. So you would just pass it around the table, let's say clockwise. So Jonathan would be getting yours, Marie would be getting his, and then you would be getting Marie's, and all of you would be adding these troubles or the problems, the solutions, a little bit of both to each other's stories. Correct?
Yeah, and then from there you that adds another sort of aspect to it. So something that your character as a secondary PC, somebody looks around and they're helping, they're assisting in some way. Jonathan's character adds his bit to the story and then goes, why did I do this thing? I made this choice. I helped. I alerted the guards that there was a crime or something like that. What does that say about me in doing this to complicate or to support the other player's story. And there's your second aspect.
Absolutely. And correct me, so when you are adding to that card, what you are writing, is that an aspect you, the player, is adding to your character's sheet, or is that something you are adding to someone else's character? The aspect.
You are adding to the other player's story with your aspect.
Okay, perfect.
So yeah, it is. So like so Vanessa passes her card to Jonathan, and she gets Marie's card. Marie's story, Vanessa is a secondary player in, but whatever happens in that story is Vanessa's aspect coming to the forefront. So there's a little, you're a secondary player, but the spotlight is on you. The metaphorical camera is following you in this moment, while it's oh lordy, I tried to think of a movie example that works, and it just I've never seen a movie before, if you ask me right now.
All this time, never seen one movie.
Every single film I've ever seen didn't exist. It's the secondary hero. It's the secondary hero sort of getting their moment to shine to support the primary story, but we still learn something about that secondary character. It's
yes.
All I can think of is Lewis from Ant-Man. Like Lewis is not. It's not about him. It's not about his story, but his actions are important to Paul Rudd's character surviving some of those things, and that doesn't diminish Lewis's part of the story. It's just not his story.
Still makes him rememberable and gives him something, gives him some weight in that story.
Yes, 100%. And like that couldn't happen without him being there. Yes. It is a significant moment for both of you. It's less significant in the primary player's story than it is following through onto the next one.
Absolutely.
And that gives you your second aspect. And then you do it one more time and you cross paths again. And you get whichever one you haven't touched yet.
Yes.
So Vanessa would now has given Jonathan one. She got one of Marie, so now she gets Jonathan's. And then it is you're contributing to sort of that last piece of the adventure that the other two have already started. So the three of you are kind of, you don't all have to end up together at the end, but you are making yourself sort of an additional component, again, resolving or complicating whatever happened in that second part of the adventure, that second aspect. And what does that teach you about your character in that moment? That might change. And you're adding, basically, this is adding shades and highlights to a character. Because by the time you've got your high concept and your trouble, great. You have thinking of it like art, right? You have your bare bones sketch. You understand the shape and the form of the object. Second, and then once you start doing the adventures, you start cutting away and adding in details and doing
your line art.
Yeah, doing the line art and adding in all of that. Second story, you add color. You're adding in how you are helpful or harmful or just a little bit chaotic. And then the third time, you're like, great, this is still really flat. How can I add depth? How can I add something to really make this character pop off the page instead of just being, hello, I have a 20 in strength, which gives me a +5 hooray. So those are, and that's really like
personality.
Yeah, it's the depth. It's that world. It helps make the world feel more lived in a way that you don't really get in D&D unless you've played a lot, or other systems where it is like you can roll 4d6 5 times, drop the lowest stat, give yourself some armor, and go adventuring. This is much more focused on who is going out, who is adventuring, and why. Or even not adventuring, who is going out and doing these things and why.
Absolutely. One of my favorite quotes that I've seen of someone actually describing Fate is, it's about who the characters are, not what they can do.
Yes, it is 100%.
It's so good. And that's every time that I look at Fate, I'm like, that exact quote.
Yeah.
But yeah, so after you do the final aspect, when you add the last bit of information to another person's story, you get your final aspect, whatever it may be, whether you solved a problem, complicated it, or so forth. Then you are done with your aspects for now. Correct? What do you move on to next? Because I haven't built a character for Fate. Haven't played a game of it yet. So I would love to know, after the aspects and building your character, or at least the very base idea with those details finally in place, what do you go on to next?
So next is skills. And this is something where the skills vary wildly depending on what might be relevant in your game. You'll have things like, let's see, is this all of them on this page actually? Athletics, burglary, contacts, crafts, deceive, drive, empathy, fight, investigate, lore, notice, physique, provoke, rapport, resources, shoot, stealth, and will. If that turned into word salad, that's totally fine. They're all written on the character sheet. But the important thing is you will pick going around the table, you start picking those cards. Evil Hat does phenomenal supporting products because they have all their PDFs. They have skill cards, which you can literally lay out on the table, and people are like, ooh, so like strong woman with the sword, fight, probably thing that she's really best at. So you have, instead of having a pure numerical value, you also have sort of adjectives attached to them. So you get 1 skill that you're great at, 2 that you're good at, 3 that you're fair at, and 4 that you're average with. And so based on these aspects and the trouble and everything that you've done up to this point, you can now go, great, I'm going to be great at fighting. I'm going to be good at maybe, I just lost that page because I didn't use the bookmark that I had. You can sort of pulling from those things, from those aspects you have, you're able to develop this understanding of this character. So like Vanessa, fight, great. Make that your top skill. Athletics, probably good. Empathy, also probably good, because if you're not going to hunt down someone who's running away from you who saw you commit a crime, you're probably a caring person.
Exactly.
And these are physical, emotional, and mental stats that don't have anything really assigned to them other than just the word. Which is how you can get away with a setting agnostic system, is you keep it that those honestly describe Fate more than anything. It's a perfect word for a wide number of conversations. It's everything that an English teacher hates, where it's like, he fought him. Fight is the word. That can be with a gun. That could be with a sword. That can be with a laser pistol. It could be anything you need it to be. You could fight with words if you're in that Victorian, telenovela romance. You're having a verbal duel. You could make fight your thing. And that, based on the world that you all have all created, that's what fight means in this room.
Exactly, and that's how you make your individual games also more interesting, because you do have just these very basic words.
Yeah.
Fight. What does that mean? It's so great.
how do I have if I want to fight somebody in this room, aside from literally reaching out across the room and punching him, what is that? Is that allowed? Is there a different way to fight in this? And this sort of gets into the narrative storytelling that everyone is doing together. Fate was the first time that I really locked in and went, this is cooperative storytelling. Everyone has equal weight and equal say in what's going on, and respecting what is going on around me, and respecting the words and respecting the ideas that other people have.
Absolutely.
This is the ultimate yes and or no but game.
It's so good. It's so good. And again, I've just been like, every single game that I have and talk about, I want to play. But specifically, Fate has been one I've wanted to dabble in, just to see, what we can do in it. Yeah. What are the possibilities? And
it's very forgiving. Fun. It's very forgiving if you screw stuff up, because it's like, okay, yeah, whatever. We'll just move past that. That's the rule now, and we kind of keep going.
Yeah. And if you end up not liking a rule, just say, no, I'm good.
No, we're not going to do that. And so what each of those skills do is they give you, now we get into the number crunching a little bit. They give you a plus to that roll. So you are, they have this thing called the ladder, which is really your success and failure of how this thing is going to go. So like the ladder basically ranks your success or failure as you're doing these things. So Vanessa is great at fighting. She gets a +4. And then when you roll dice, when you do get to roll dice, there is dice rolling in this game, I promise. You are rolling D6s that have a plus sign, a minus sign, a plus sign, a minus sign, or a blank.
Yes.
And you take those 6 dice, you shake them, and you roll them. And pluses and minuses neutral each other out. And you determine how well you kind of do. And by having a great skill at that, you're adding +4. So you could roll nothing. You could roll an absolute 0, which really nothing happens. Like you attempt something, you kind of achieve it. It's a mediocre victory, and you kind of do it. Yeah. If there's nothing stopping you, that's the equivalent of like, all right, well, you rolled a 10 on your lock picking. But if you have the bonus, that gets added on at the end. So you can go from, I rolled a 0 to, I rolled a 4, which is great. Which the difference, and especially if you're rolling to hit somebody or to do something difficult, you may need to roll. There is resistance. There is a number you have to roll to beat. And depending on how hard you beat that number, we trigger additional aspects. You, as a player, might get to make an aspect about the scene. So, again, we'll get to that in a minute. You also have something called stunts. So, like once you pick your skills, and you're like, great, this is what I'm good at. You pick stunts, which is kind of a more specific skill. These are a little more like feats in D&D.
I've been very curious about exactly what stunts do and what they offer for the game, because that's the one part of the book so far that I have not gotten into. So this is going to be entirely new territory that I'm very excited about. Yes.
So the stunts are specifics for your character. So let's pick a random one. Provoke. Let's pick provoke. We'll make Jonathan. Jonathan is great at provoking people. He's an asshole. He loves starting fights. So he's like, this is something that Jonathan's really good at. He likes getting into trouble and causing, getting an emotional response of some kind. It's the being a jerk skill is literally in the book. So you could have a stunt. That's like, you could pick a fight. Like you can, if you want to pick a fight and you're provoking somebody, you could just be really, really good at it and give yourself, make somebody more likely to engage, to get angry, or you make them attack you instead of somebody else. If you wanted to, you could be the target. You could make that person's target shift to you, and now you're the problem, and you're the one that they want to put in the ground. And so, and that all depends on how Jonathan's built his character. If he's the guy who just starts a fight and walks away, it could be something like, "Hey, if I provoke and leave, no one's going to follow me. Like I can cause a distraction by pointing. Like I get people to start getting angry, and I leave the room, and they take it out on each other." That
have
would
the problem solve itself.
Or just like, I need a distraction. So I'm going to be like, hey, did you hear Johnny was saying some really, really rude things about your wife. And then, Billy Bob stands up and goes, hey, Johnny, what are you doing? And then they start a fight and Jonathan just scoots out of the way. Like that's an idea for a stunt. And it is a little more mechanical, but it's, what is the bonus? What can I do? What am I extra good at? What special thing do I get to do with this skill?
Absolutely.
For something
you
like
can create your own, correct?
Yes. That one, yeah. So like the one that we were just talking about, like starting a bar fight and walking away, was something that I kind of just made up, because that is because I picked provoke and I was like, oh, what is this? It's like, there's one called okay, fine. You could use provoke in place of empathy to learn a target's aspects or learn something about them. And instead of being like, I want to learn more about you, you just keep needling them until they crack and show you something.
Make them explode with anger.
Really
or
just like I'm gonna keep pushing. I'm gonna keep poking until I find a button, and I'm gonna push that button until it does something. Or like one of the ones is like, I think one of the ones they come up with in the example is like, if I haven't been there, I've read about it. And
Yes,
that's for
that's a great one.
Your knowledge-based person. And again, these are all, you want these to be evocative phrases. Something that like, if you pack as much information and as much useful, as much juicy content into a single sentence as you can.
You want it to be useful in the game. These are all, like, you get only so many of these, especially just to start.
Yeah.
You get so many, and you want to try and use these as much as possible. And my favorite thing is saying, like, aspects should be like a double-edged sword. There should be goods, there should be good things and negative things that can come from a single aspect. And they even recommend, like, if you're thinking of an aspect, try and think of two good ways it can be used and two bad ways it can be used. And if you can think of both of those, good. That sounds like a great aspect. But they want you to use these aspects and stunts and all of that because that is your character. You don't.
Correct.
Everything else is role play and improv and coming up with things. If you want to actually use the mechanical bits of the story, you have to make them interesting and usable. And that's where also the creating the world together helps out so much more because you know what you're going to be getting into. And your GM will know what your aspects are and create a story that will help you actually be able to use the not the abilities, but the aspects and the skills that your character does have to make the story feel like it's all about you, because it is.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is one of the games where, with a lot of games that I've played where it's like, hey, build the world. Cool. Go play in it. This is one where as a GM, I go, okay, either I've come in with like, I have a big like I basically have a high concept for the world. What if Magic but 1920s Mafia?
Of course.
Cool. Great. Let's dive into that a little. Let's figure out where the players want to be. And then instead of building this massive world with tomes and tomes and tomes of book, I just go, cool, we are in a city. We are in a section of the city. We can explore as big or as small as we need to, and let's start building from there. And then sit down with my players. They come up with characters. We do our session zero, always important, character building. And then I go, great, I'll see you in 2 weeks. I'm going to go make a plot. And like, I take all the juicy tidbits and I go hide in my office with like the door shut and a hood up and some candles burning. It's a little culty. Don't worry about it. And then we come back 2 weeks later and we come back 2 weeks later and I go, great, let's play. Because if I build a story, me building a story without the characters is me building a movie set without any idea of what's going to happen. And I'm like, great, I've built this massive castle. Oh,
no script.
We're not doing anything with a castle. We're gonna stay in this dingy downtown bar, and that's all we're gonna be at. Well, shoot, I just spent all this time building a castle that we're not gonna use. I might save it for later and transfer it into another system. But this is not a game where you come in with a capital B big idea and go, this is the game we're playing. Because unless you're friends enough with your players that they're like, cool, this is a world I want to play in. Let's start poking holes in it. And that's sort of where, and I think that's a really good opportunity to talk about the meta currency, talk about invoking aspects and fate coins. Because this is shit that I pull into almost every game that I can. Because so meta currency, what the hell is that? If you've played D&D, it's inspiration. It's a thing that your character gets, but it only exists on the character sheet. It doesn't exist in the real world or in the world of the players. Fate has fate points, fate coins, whatever you want to call them. I've used poker chips. I've used pieces of candy. It is a thing that the players are trading back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're going through the world and playing this game, the GM is describing a scene, and they will be describing aspects of a scene, very similar to the aspects that you as players and you have all come up with together for yourselves. You're coming up with these aspects for the world you're in, for the characters you're up against, what kind of things you're looking at. Okay, you're at a bar. What's the bar like? Well, it's all the adjectives you use to describe this bar: low ceilings, wobbly like half broken tables and chairs, strongest booze this side of the river. Those are all aspects. And what you can do in the game is like you use those aspects as touchstones for the story. So like you're in this bar, maybe you're looking for information, and Jonathan wants to start a fight. And he goes, "Hey, I know these chairs and tables break really easily, so I'm going to pick one up and like I'm going to I'm going to lean up against somebody's chair and try to break it out from under him to see if I can start something." And that's you invoking an aspect of the scene, and that's invoking with a capital I, because you will go, "Hey, I want to use this," and you will give the GM a fate coin. And it gives you, and that might be something where the GM's like, "I'm not even going to make you roll. You pay me a fate coin, done." The chair's going to collapse under him, and the guy's going to be able to get up and be like, "Hey, what the hell are you doing here?" And then you get what you want.
Mm-hmm.
The trick is the GM can do the same to you.
Yes. Make it complicated.
Yes. You can do what's called a compel. So like the players can trade in fate coins to invoke. You can do a couple of things with fate coins. Let's start with what the players get to do. You can add +2 to your roll or re-roll all your dice if you're doing like a skill check or something. You can give another character +2 and like describe how you're helping them and give a little bonus.
And all of these have to involve an aspect as well.
Correct.
It can't just be I trade this in. It's not like inspiration in D&D where it's like I have this and I'll just use it because I can roll 2d20s. It's I need to bring in an aspect of my character or from the environment
of the world
to actually
we're in.
help.
Yeah, exactly. And like if in the useful skill, one of the skills we talked about is empathy, is finding out somebody else's aspect so you can start poking it. So like if let's say Marie has a really high empathy, she can be like, "Hey, tell me one of the aspects of the guy that we're trying to find, or like the guy that's sitting here in front of me." And it could be like he's got a short temper, or he doesn't get mad easily. And then you can invoke that and play off of what you know, play off of that aspect. And all these aspects, this is where the index cards come in, because you write them down and just write down aspects of like, "Hey, these are a character's aspects. This is the aspects of the scene." And so we'll say Jonathan is like, "Hey, the table and chairs are really fragile, so I want to try and break this dude's chair out from under him." GM says, "Cool, give me a fate point." So he trades that in. The chair breaks, and the GM might be like, might have another that might make a new aspect where it's just called like debris. As things are starting to break and there's things on the floor.
As the scene advances.
As the scene changes, the room itself changes, because a lot of battle maps, especially like bigger ones, they're kind of static. Because it's like, well, I put all the time into this model. I wasn't ready for my building to catch on fire. This one, it's super easy. You just take an index card, go building on fire, and slap it down in front of your players. And now in the rules of the game, the building's on fire. Super flexible. And again, it's unbelievably flexible in any direction you want to pull on it.
And I, just from my experience, as someone, I actually have a very hard time imagining things in my head. So when I play games with theater of the mind, it's a struggle for me to remember aspects of,
absolutely.
Battle scenes, stuff like that. And knowing that you could just write it all down on an index card that everyone can see it, everyone knows what's happening, and everyone can just reference it and like, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that. I want that works perfect for something that I want to do, because
Or
I might want to start actually fighting the guy at the bar, because he might be someone that we're chasing down and we just needed to start a fight to cause havoc to then try and get him out or something
so
like
that Vanessa can go pick out a single target while the rest of the bar is in flames, because no one's going to notice if
Exactly.
one guy gets beaten up and dragged out of there. Um, and it also does something that, as someone who plays a lot of board games, I suffer from AP, analysis paralysis, or action paralysis. And
Mhm.
it's something that you get a lot of in D&D and a lot of role-playing games where the game goes, you could do whatever you want. Yeah. And then you look and they're like, well, what do you want to do? And they're like, I could do anything. Oh no, what's right? And your brain, you just get inundated with choices and your brain
Mhm.
locks up. And it happens to me all the time. My partner makes fun of me for it incessantly when we play board games, because she just watches my brain blue screen. Fate is really
So
good. Yeah, it's just like, oh, what's the right choice? I haven't had time to think through all of my options, so I'm just gonna freak out and freeze. Fate is really good when you're just like, okay, what do I know about the scene? And you look at the table and you go, cool, there's debris on the floor. Can I use that? Yeah, maybe. The fight's already kind of starting. The booze here is really strong. Do I start a fire? Is that the plan? And like, you have suggestions that aren't generic, like one of my favorite
Someone
things
with a sword.
yeah, oh no, it's the guards kick down the door or something like that. Maybe there are no guards. Maybe it's the trash man is supposed to come by, and it's all stuff that you have all built together to set up this scene. And then any choice that you make referencing one of those immediately fits the scene of what's happening.
Absolutely.
And you have it in this, again, that's why you want to keep the phrases short. You want to keep your aspects short and juicy as possible. As
also vague as possible.
Yes.
It's like, it's a perfect balance between like short, juicy, vague. Because that's where you're going to get the best uses. Because if it's vague enough, and that's also with, I think, I don't know how much we really have to cover the world building aspect, because it's as simple as, it's just creating an aspect of like not a big bad, but like kind of the first conflict. And parts of the world and things like that. It's leaving those things vague enough that as you are playing the game, you can explore it more and more and keep it open, because you don't want to put yourself in a box that you can't get out of because you put too much detail in early on, and you want to, and things end up going in a direction that, because you prepared too much at the beginning, you weren't prepared for. And so now it's like, freaking out.
Yeah. Or you're going to try and keep like you have an idea for a story and the players are going to be pulling in the opposite direction. And it kind of like doesn't give like it wants to. It doesn't flow very flexibly and comfortably. And a perfect example is like in this hypothetical bar fight scenario. What do we know about the city? There's like a lot of crime. Or like there are crime families maybe, or just like a crime-ridden city. You know, and a lot of that comes from, especially with players that want to get into the nitty-gritty and are comfortable going, hey, what about this? Is this a cool idea? Maybe. And if while you're building your characters, the world builds around it. And you're sort of you're building the scenes and the aspects of each of those oh god, all the words left my brain again. You're building out the world based on what the players see, how they see their place in it. If you've got someone who is a superhero who fights crime, that's the other thing. This is great for fucking superhero games. It's so good because it's like, yeah, you do like 8 things and your stunt is basically your like more specific superpower.
Actually, that's I mean, I've seen like neutral systems like talk about superhero playing superhero stories in it, and I never really gave it much thought until you just said that right now. Like, where it's just the specific abilities. Like superheroes have their, specific, like their small arsenal of very specific things.
Yeah.
Perfect. Because that would just be each of your aspects and and your stunts and all of that. Oh my God.
And so that's my favorite noise when I'm talking to RPGs with people is hearing that metaphorical fate coin just drop and you're like, oh, this is brilliant. Because that's the sort of thing where it's like, cool, I want to invoke an aspect of myself. I give the GM a fate coin, and I can use my flamethrower ability or something like that. I can invoke that and do that thing. But again, so that's kind of like building that world, building the scene, getting everything ready, invoking different aspects of it. Some of them you might only be able to use once or twice. Some of them, the aspects might also be a timer. Kind of like in Blades in the Dark where you have clocks, you can use that aspect. So like burning building, you can put 6 boxes on it. And as people help or hurt that aspect of the world
or ignore it
or use that part of it. Yeah, it's like, oh, the building's on fire. I want like this beam comes down, and like the players get a little more descriptor in their role playing. It's like, I want to invoke the building's collapsing or on fire. This beam comes down and blocks off the exit so this guy can't get away. Cool, done. Give me that. I might mark off a box on the building collapsing because you've described more damage happening to it. But that gives you a narrative edge to make this kind of choice.
And it gives you something cool to do. Like pretty much anything that you could do in Fate can be cool because you're using these awesome aspects and stunts that you made, or the awesome aspects of the environment,
or
and
of your team.
All flourishes. Exactly, because along with I know before we get into it, so we've talked about invoking the aspects.
Right.
And other players can also invoke aspects of other people and other players, basically being able to use them to their advantage, so forth. There are also you can also use aspects to compel and create an advantage. I would love if you could explain what those do within the game and how to do it.
So compelling is something that usually, at least in my experience, the GM gets to do. This is the GM getting to push back against the players a little bit. Not to be like, no, you're not allowed to have fun, but in the way that makes things exciting and dramatic, and it raises the stakes a little bit. So there's kind of 2 different ways to do a compel, but both of them involve me going, hey, this is an aspect you have. This might be your trouble. I'm going to give you a fate coin. I'm going to pay you in this meta currency. You're in a situation where this might seem particularly relevant. Oh, isn't that a shame? Darn. We'll go with our compassionate sword wielding Vanessa.
Of course.
She's chasing down this member of the Black Knives. She found the guy who this lieutenant of the Black Knives, and she's got him, and she's trapped him in an alley, and he has a hostage. He's grabbed somebody and has a knife to their neck, and she's a compassionate human. And the GM is me. I could be like, hey, I want to compel you. I'm going to compel your compassion and have you drop your sword. Like, it would make sense that you lower your sword when he's got a knife to her neck. And as the player, you have the option to refuse, but it costs you a fate point. It costs you a coin. So you always have the opportunity to say no if that cost is worth it to you.
Absolutely. Which I think gives the perfect balance of bringing in trouble and conflicts to your players, but also giving them the agency to say no. But if they've refused the conflicts and they refuse the drawbacks of their aspects enough, they won't be able to do it for forever.
Won't get to do the cool things because a lot of the aspects require you to pay in to invoke them. Some of them are free, and some of them don't necessarily have a cost associated with them. And this kind of gets back into the rolling where if you roll 2, say you go to fight a guy and he puts up a resistance of 2 and you have a great, and Vanessa has a great in fight. So she's already 2 above him. She's 2 points above where he ends up. By default, she's going to succeed. She has a better fight skill than he does. She's going to succeed. But if she rolls and ends up 3+, she gets to make an advantage. She gets to generate an advantage and generate an aspect about this scene that she gets to write down, or Vanessa's player gets to write down and say, hey, like, I disarm, like, he doesn't have a weapon. Great, you've disarmed him. That is the advantage you create. This man doesn't have a sword. And then you write that down, and that is an advantage you get to, that's something you get to invoke for free, because until the GM says he runs over and grabs his sword again, that he's disarmed. That is just a fact of the story that you have created.
I mean, I mean, just from the wording itself, you've created yourself an advantage because you did so well. And
that is an aspect that you can then invoke for free because you helped create that with your role. You have set yourself up for success because you are good at your job. This is one of the things, like, Monster of the Week assumes that you are competent individuals who are good at their jobs. And that is a fair assessment here. There might be times where you are rolling with a skill you're not great at. And you won't be able to necessarily make all of those advantages, but you're able to, you're still able to progress. And even if you tie, you'll still succeed. The only time you you fail your action is if you roll less than whatever resistance somebody has. And that's usually, that's hard to do. Unless it is a very specific kind of challenge.
And you're taking a real big risk.
And you're taking a huge risk with a skill you're not good at. But even then, kind of talking about the fate coin, you either fail the action or you can succeed, but at great personal cost. Like there will be a downside no matter what. But if you absolutely have to defuse the bomb, you will defuse it, but something very bad is going to happen to you in return. You may not blow up, but like bad things are going to happen.
Absolutely. And I think that's actually a great way to start talking about there is stress and consequences in this game that are mechanical in the way of you can use them up. And you use stress and consequences when you are stress is when you're trying to avoid a consequence, but a consequence is when you are mostly going to be like taking personal harm of some sort, and it's going to be a lasting effect. Yes. I would love some examples of how this has come up in personal games and how it just works in the game itself.
It's definitely one of those where, you have basically two tracks of stress. You have a physical stress and a mental stress.
Yes.
So if you are doing something like drive, for the best example that I could come up with, and this is a roller coaster of a game, so bear with me. It started out, and this is also a sign of how flexible Fate is. It started out as a horror game where people were going to be in a cabin in the woods, because we were in a cabin in the woods, and I was hoping for a Wendigo, Yeti, kind of horror murder story. And I was like, this is what I want to do. Here's the setting. And they're like, what if we're recording a commercial? And I went, okay, hold on. And then the players started just kind of talking about it and coming up with these crazy ideas. One of them was like a Twitch streamer who was like the guy driving the car, or wanted to be the one driving the car. We had the actual race car driver. We had the mechanic for the car. Like, it was this, it snowballed into this entire different direction. And we ended up kind of becoming like a Pacific Northwest monster story involving something called a spoofer, which is a combination of a spider and a gopher. And they are... And that's really as far as we got with what the hell a spoofer was. And it's fair. It was like we don't ask questions about the spoofers, because one of the players was like this crazy, the driver of the car was this crazy backwoods redneck who was like, them spoofers in damn dare hills, and everyone just grabbed spoofers and ran with it. To this day, spoofer is just a one-word joke that comes up every once in a while in our group chat, and it is the dumbest thing. But that was one. So through the course of this, they end up angering the hive of spoofers, and they're being chased. And the driver was doing he's a rally car driver driving on a track he didn't know, and the Twitch streamer was in the front seat. And I don't know how much you know about rally car driving, but do you know anything about rally car driving? Let me actually ask a question.
No.
Okay. So rally car driving is sort of a point-to-point race through roads that are not really made for racing.
Of course. Nice.
And you are basically bolted into this car, and you go as fast as you can from point to point to point. And you are driving there are two people to a car. You have the driver and your navigator, and your navigator reads out specific directions, 500 meters, turn left, this is the degree of the turn. This is how fast you should be going through it sometimes, or they're relying on the driver to do that.
All right, incredibly stressful, cool.
Unbelievably stressful situation, especially when you've got other people in the back of the car and your navigator doesn't know what the hell he's doing because he's like a 16-year-old Twitch streamer who hasn't really done much in this world. And so in that, having the driver make driving checks of increasing difficulty. He's like, all right, I need you to roll drive, because there's really 4 actions you can do in Fate. You overcome an obstacle, create an advantage, you attack somebody, or defend. So this was just a series of the driver overcoming actions, overcoming obstacles. Basically, he's driving 80 miles an hour through the backwoods of the Pacific Northwest, which are not really road friendly.
Yeah, no, not really.
And so it was just overcome an obstacle, overcome an obstacle, overcome an obstacle. And the turns got more and more complicated because the rest of the party was trying to keep the spoofers off the car. And so he started accruing mental stress because he's trying harder and harder to keep things on the road and making these last minute adjustments. He ended up, let me remember exactly how this landed, but essentially you have either 2, 3, or 4 boxes of stress. And where is the chunk in the rules? Because it has been a minute since I played. I want to make sure that I tell our lovely viewers at home how to do this correctly.
I believe it actually involves your will and physique skills. Yes. And if you have a certain bonus to each of them, you get an additional box. So you start out with 2 in each track. So start out with 2 in mental stress, start out with 2 in physical stress. And then if you have like a +1 to +2, you get a 3rd box. If you have a +3 to +4, you get a 4th. And then if I think you have higher than that, which is kind of hard to do at the beginning, you get another consequence that's tied in with whichever track that you fully filled up. So if you fully filled up mental, then it gives you essentially a mental consequence box for you to fill out.
And you can then it does make you tankier in that regard, because your the stress gets filled. And why is this number of stress boxes based on physical will? So yeah, with this driving thing, you gain stress equal to the difference in between what you rolled and what the target difficulty is. So imagine in D&D, if you failed a will save by, instead of just like pass fail, instead of that binary, there are the differences to it. So like, you failed by 2, so you take your pencil and you fill in mental stress. You fill in that 2 box because you failed by that amount. So you check off the difference between those 2 numbers. Unless if that box is already filled, you check off one that's higher. And so like at the start of the game, you get 1 stress or 2 stress before you start taking consequences. That's when bad things start to happen. With consequences, 3 severities: mild, moderate, or severe. So if you say on this driving check that he made, he failed by 5, and he only had a 3. His highest value was a 3 in his mental stress, which was available, but it still doesn't add up to 5. He did not fail by 5. So you can use your consequence and your stress box to make that number, to make a value of that.
Yes.
So with 5, you can either do a mild consequence, which counts as 2 stress. And then, so 5 minus 2 is 3. And then he had his 3 mental stress box, so he could check that off and be fine with just a mild consequence, which could be something like mild again, this is another aspect. This is a thing that the GM kind of goes, okay, you're a little frazzled. You're getting frantic.
Can't think.
You're not really. You're starting to get distracted because you're looking at everything, trying to remember this road and trying to figure out what's going on. Or you can take the 4 and take a bigger consequence in exchange for a smaller marker on your stress. So it's really, do I think I can get through this now and can I fill up all my stress before I start taking consequences, or do I take the big hit early, take 4 to get myself a moderate consequence and only fill in one of my smaller boxes, so I come out of this with maybe one permanent large, not permanent, permanent's not quite the word I want, a larger, more impactful aspect on this than I would coming out of this with just a lot of stress, but nothing permanent, because stress goes away sort of between sessions. Some of the consequences don't go away until actions are taken. So like a moderate or severe thing would be like a 2nd-degree burn, a compound fracture, a trauma-induced phobia, something like that. Something that shapes the character in a way that does not go away quickly or easily. And
these do become aspects, correct?
Correct.
As you take the consequences, which means that they can be used against you.
It can be invoked or compelled, and I can go, oh man, you've got a broken hand. You're gonna have a real hard time climbing this rope ladder with that broken hand, buddy. Here's this, if you accept this compel and that might increase the difficulty, that might give you something, will give you a downside, but that also gives you currency to use later. And I don't believe you can use you can only compel or invoke. You can't do both. So if I, as the GM, go, you're gonna have a real hard time climbing that ladder, buddy, I'm gonna compel. You can't immediately turn around and go, oh well, I've got this thing to give me this bonus. That's usually decided ahead of time. You can't take the coin that I give you and then turn it around and give it back to me.
Okay, that's interesting.
So it's less of a just like, oops, nothing happens. Because this
makes
fate
it so that
is,
there's actual stakes.
There are stakes. There's push and pull, right? Yeah. It's less. Tug of war isn't fun to watch if both sides are equally matched. Even if they are, you have moments where that rope swings one way or the other, and you start being like, "Oh, is it working? Oh no, they're winning. Oh no, we're winning!" And like give it that back and forth, because that's what makes it exciting. That's what gives it tension.
Absolutely.
So yeah, then I believe that's consequences. And like that's the other, like, this entire game is so based around, like, again, as the player, what are you comfortable with happening to you? And there is, because you are all coming up with these ideas for consequences, some of the best consequences have come from other players.
Absolutely.
Because as the GM, you're juggling all these things and you're like, all right, cool, you get a, you sprained your ankle, and then somebody's like, what if he got his, like, we talked about how this place is rat infested. Oh, it's a minor inconvenience. He stepped in a rat trap and it like crunched his foot. And like he's got a mousetrap on his foot. And that's so much more visually and narratively evocative than, oh, I sprained my ankle. Because now it also adds room for comedy. It adds that little piece of flair that you've all built this story towards. And everybody's on the same page with it. Everybody can feed into it off of each other and really help elevate it together. Because it's not you against the GM. It is absolutely cooperative in a way that very, very few games can actually land, because in a lot of those, the GM still has the rules, is still sort of the arbiter and the referee, and the GM does still have a bit of that final say. But for a group of folks who have played together and are comfortable giving each other back and forth without being like, oh, if I say no, the GM's going to make it so much worse for me later on, you can get an unparalleled level of flexibility and comfort.
Absolutely. And it just like, I think it makes everyone more invested in the story as well when they can bring in their own elements. It's not just the GM doing it. And so everyone's thinking of opportunities of conflicts and troubles that could be happening and not just advantages, which I think is a more interesting way to play games. It shouldn't always be, I want to win, I want to win, I want to win. If you want to win, play a board game.
Yes.
If you want to create a compelling story, it can't always be positive. There has to be conflict and there has to be things that go wrong, because when you finish the story, it's going to be more satisfying that way. You had to. That's why when we watch a movie, when things go wrong and they have to overcome something, that is so much more interesting than just watching them go from point A to point B and succeed the entire time and nothing happens. Yeah. So much more compelling.
And you need that contrast, and you need there. And I think you need that. You need those stumbling blocks, but you also need those victories. And by putting the players in a position where they are very empowered to do, they get to rule of cool. This game is baked. The rule of cool is so pivotal to this game because you want to make each scene as cool as fucking possible. Sorry, you're going to have to bleep that one. But like, you have to make those as cool as possible so that you can make it like, this is one of the best groups I've seen run this game. And actually where I learned about this game is from Will Wheaton's tabletop show that he ran years ago. It's on Geek and Sundry. They do a 2-parter in Fate, and they have like, his audience his players are a little skewed toward professional, like actual screenwriters. The screenwriter used the Fate system and used the aspect system in writing a TV show. Because it's a shortcut. It's such a cheat sheet for explaining how this character operates. Because you have, what are the 5 core things about this character that I need to know? This is also great for making villains, because you go, these are the 5 things I need to know about this villain. I don't need stunts. Stunts can come up in the game, but I can come up with what this villain, I have a good thing and a bad thing about this villain. Or about my NPC, my BBEG. I have a high concept. I have who they are as a person, and I have a flaw for them. And that gives your players something to find. It's something to bite into. It's something to dig in and explore. Because the best villains
in the game. Oh God, I love it. Because like in the game, if you could actually find out these things and use them, even better. Because like, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go for it. I've been rambling a lot.
It just always makes me so happy, because I feel like in a lot of games, like you can have those aspects. You can create, the flaws and parts of your villain, but they might not always come up to be playable parts in the game that your players can actually work with. This has it so built into the system itself that it's going to get used. It's going to get used one way or another, whether the players figure it out or whether it gets brought in by a mechanic or whatever reason, it's going to get used, which means that all the work and effort that you are taking to prep and create these scenarios is going to get the payoff.
Yeah, it's like, and my favorite example of really, really good villain the players never meet. Have you seen The Fifth Element?
I have not.
Okay.
I am cultured in a very specific thing with movies. Whatever my parents were into, basically.
I've watched far too many good and terrible movies. Fifth Element is a phenomenal sci-fi movie. With Bruce Willis and Chris Rock and Gary Oldman are really the big 3. Bruce Willis is sort of the protagonist. The reluctant protagonist who ends up rescuing this girl Lilu. Go watch it. I can't fucking explain it here. Sorry again. You're good. The villain, Gary Oldman's character, runs basically. He's kind of evil space Bezos. He never meets the protagonist. Those 2 characters never meet. But he is one of the he is such a good villain because of how we see him interacting with all of the people around him.
Mm-hmm.
And even though, like, we understand that as an audience member, we understand how this why he's so compelling and why he's such a good villain.
Mm-hmm.
And Bruce Willis's character will never see that, but we can see how they operate at cross purposes. We can see how the two of them are similar and different from each other because we have that understanding. And as a GM, if I have a trouble, if I have these aspects of this character, I can see what my players are doing. And and this is just me as a GM, really just loving the sandpit that I found myself in. I can see how these things come across purposes, and I go, oh, well, my villain happens to hang his trouble is like maybe he wasn't hugged enough as a child or something like that, but like he has a soft spot for kids, and maybe that's something he and Vanessa have in common.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that really humanizes your villain and pulls them from this Skeletor Saturday morning cartoon bad guy into something much more believable. And it makes it so much easier to, like, you can have those 5 aspects written on an index card for any game you have. And when someone's like talking to the villain, you're like, well, here are the 5 core things about his character that I need to know to RP this character quickly and effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a good cheat sheet for NPCs. NPCs, you might have one skill they're really good at, a high concept of trouble, and maybe one aspect or stunt. That's all you need. And you're like, cool, this is who this person is. Great. If anything else pops up, I'll write it on the card later, and we'll just go from there.
I honestly even like listening to this and hearing it get talked out, because obviously it's one thing to read like the actual rules. It's one thing to actually play it and experience it in a different way. But hearing this get talked out, I could even see this being great advice for other games that you play, of creating almost like these little cards that are just, here are the top 5 most important. Here's 5 of the most important elements of this character, and it helps you roleplay them. Automatically, I'm already thinking, do I need to do this for my games? Would this like immediately, because that can keep you consistent, keep you on track. It makes the continuity also flow a lot better if you just have this card that gives you the most important information.
And these are also things that, like, your players will ask about. Your players will have ideas for what they think the villain is. And you're like, oh, I should probably maybe there's a side of this that my player discovers as they're learning more about who their adversary is. And the thing that I love about Fate is it is such a toolbox, because there are chapters about, like, there's a whole, the running the game section is good for literally any game you're running, because it talks about advantages and conflicts and how to make things challenging but rewarding. It talks about failure and how you make failure awesome but also important.
Move the story forward.
Let's talk about NPCs. Let's talk about plot. Let's talk about how you can build stories together in a way that clicks, and you have all these components in front of you. How do you build this metaphorical watch and set it running? And it does such a good big picture narrative breakdown of that. And then if you want more, the other thing I love about the gang over at Evil Hat, because they did Thirsty Sword Lesbians and a couple of other really, really good games.
I have so many of their games on my shelf. I'm not ashamed of it. I love I love everything they have.
They have done multiple. I think they're actually. Oh, I do own more D&D books, but that's also source books and things. But that's fine. We're not gonna look too closely at that part of the shelf. They have toolkits specific. It's a mini toolbox for a different aspect of the game, of role playing, of stuff like that. They also have like Fate condensed, so if you don't want to buy the whole thing, you can get like it's a little more truncated, and you can just kind of skip into it a little quicker. But they have the 3 that I have is the system toolkit, the horror toolkit, and the adversary toolkit. And the adversary toolkit is hey, do you want to make a good villain? Let's start there. Let's figure out who's your villain. Why are they a villain? What are they doing?
God, I love Evil Hat.
why are they doing what they're doing? Who are the number of bad guys? Let's talk about what kind of stuff. And it goes everything from a like spy movie heist to post-apocalyptic to like a pulpy Indiana Jones style. And it's like, here's how you can use the toolkit and tweak it and shift it in a way that makes sense for whatever game you're trying to run. And also gives you examples of like, do you want to play this Indiana Jones pulp style fiction game? Here are the kind of traps that might be really interesting. What kind of like all the movies that you've seen, you're like, I want to do that movie. Fate can go, yeah, we can make that happen. And the horror toolkit, the horror toolkit is honestly one of my favorites because it talks through so much of what horror, of how to make things scary. And this is the book, like, as we rambled on to 10 Candles about, the trick with horror is making players feel helpless. And how do you, like, these people are empowered, and in a game where the players get to do all kinds of cool shit, how do you make them feel afraid? How do you make it, like, it's the Call of Cthulhu problem. I've got a fight skill. I'm going to go punch Cthulhu. No, you're not. You're not going to get within 100 yards of that thing before it just, like, sends you off. Yeah, you're just going to pop. And I'm sorry, that's it. How do you balance horror? How do you, like, there's a little bit about horror compels. How do you offer safe places? How do you make an aspect that's invoked both a good thing and a bad thing? Because all of your aspects should do both. They should always sort of be that double-edged sword. How do you make that work in horror? How do you make that work in this powerful and powerless scenario? And it just has one of the most eloquent breakdowns of how the horror genre works and how to safely do it in a role-playing game. I love 10 Candles. So 10 Candles has a large, it assumes a decent chunk of the learning curve. Like, you've played a role-playing game before and you want to do 10 Candles. Here's how it's a little different. Fate is, you've never touched a role-playing game before in your life. Let's start here.
But this is just tad bit off topic, but that's actually a big reason why I like reading a lot of these RPG books, is watching them break down what a role-playing game is, what the mechanics do and are, and how to use them. Like, breaking it down in such a, like, mechanical, honestly, like, mechanical, this is how it's used. This is what it does. This is what you do, blah, blah, blah. I find that now, as I'm watching, like, movies and shows after I've been reading all these books, I am picking up ways that is used as a mechanic. Like, I was watching, this might sound ridiculous, I was watching the Lego movie the other day.
Oh, it's so good. Okay. Yeah. Go on.
Yeah, I was watching the Lego movie the other day, and I recently, like, talked about Blades in the Dark, and I was watching it, and they were doing the whole moment before they, like, fought I don't remember what his name is, but the bad guy in the movie. Business. Yeah, where they're essentially doing a whole, like, spy sequence of showing, like, where it's, like, you know, a little bit of, like, here's what prompted up to this, and then here's how it played out and stuff like that, and, like, it clicked in my head. That's how Blades in the Dark does it, with flashbacks and, you know, not planning before you do it, showing the action, all of that. Like, I was blown away because I read the book, and I was, at least for me, seeing it, like, explained to me in this specific manner and then seeing it in a movie made so much more sense than going, here's the movie, then here's how I can turn it into a mechanic or anything. It helps me actually experience movies and recognize tropes in a much better way, that I think is helping the way that I am approaching stories and characters, and even how to set up these types of scenarios, because I'm now able to pick them out better. I'm able to say, oh, I understand what's going on here. I understand what's making this interesting. I understand how this is, you know, complicating the story and how they're solving this problem and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, and a perfect example is like, okay, what is we'll stick with the Lego movie thing. They're trying to sneak in, and they're like, okay, there are multiple steps of this plan that need to happen. We need we need Bruce Wayne and Unikitty. They go in and distract the board so that way and distract people so that we can get in, we can deactivate the lasers and turn off the shields. And where does the tension kind of go? Why are we cutting away to Unikitty and Bruce Wayne talking about this? Like, okay, he's got their attention. We see this for a couple of seconds. Great. He's still distracted. That part of the plan is working. Oh no. Metalbeard and I can't remember the astronaut's name that's played by Charlie Day.
I don't.
Mr. Spaceship himself.
Yeah.
Like
Mr.
trying to
Spaceman.
disable. Yeah, he's trying to disable the shields, and you're like, oh no, it's not working. It's not accepting their inputs. There's a piece of tension, and everyone's hinging on that part of the plan. And then the plan works. Either they finally pass whatever skill check or whatever they're trying to do, or something ridiculous happens, and Metalbeard comes in with his like a pirate accent, and the computer's like, yeah, I got you, and shuts everything down. And then the next part of the plan can work, and finding the points where that tension. That's my favorite thing, watching really, really good storytellers. And especially for Blades in the Dark, I will always say watch heist movies. Ocean's 11 and 13. We don't really talk about 12. Ocean's 11 and 13 are so good at that because it is that like, oh, it worked. How did it work? Well, let's do a flashback. Let's go back and talk and see all of these things scattered through the movie. That when you have that proper context, you're like, oh, that's brilliant. That's why there's so much attention paid to this one thing. It's a little harder with Blades because your PC is doing the flashback, but you can still set up those moments of like, oh my God, are they going to make it? The player's like, we're going to make it because I planned for this flashback. And we go forward again.
Exactly.
And like good, there's an old saying, that's probably not that old, but I'm saying that it is. Good artists borrow, great artists steal. Find things that you're like, that's super cool. I love that. And this is when look at it, take the thing and go, why do I like this? Why do I like this sequence of things? What does it do?
Understand
and how
why
can
you like
I yes, if you just take a character and shove it into your game, that character is going to like stick out like a sore thumb. It's just going to hang out and they're going to be like, why is this person here? If you took Metalbeard and shoved him into, or you took the astronaut and shoved him into your D&D game, that doesn't make any sense. But why do we like that character? What is it about that character that we like? What are his aspects? He loves his job, like his high concept. He's an astronaut. He drives a spaceship. That's him. If you if that's all he does. His trouble. Everything's a spaceship. That's all he wants to do. He just wants to do his job. And then you can delve into the rest of his aspects. But then you can take those aspects and just go, okay, this is the core of this character. How do I make this fit in Blades in the Dark? How do I make this fit in this other game? And still get the vibe of that character? And the players that know will be like, hold on, is this the spaceship guy from the Lego movie? And you just give them a coy wink and keep going and never tell them. They'll have their guesses. You never tell them.
Absolutely. It's so useful being able to break down media.
Yes.
So incredibly useful.
Absolutely.
If you are playing RPGs, breaking down media and breaking down characters is a insanely important skill to learn and get even better at, playing these types of games.
Yeah.
Going back onto topic.
Sorry. Back to the role-play game.
Honestly, that entire thing, I think it shows even more. It shows how much value Fate does have, though, with how much it breaks down the characters in the world and everything into these aspects. Aspects are pretty much everything. I mean, and about 90% of everything. And that is just simply breaking it down.
You could play this game diceless.
You really could.
You'd have to finagle it a little bit and figure out, like, you have your core skills, you have your core competencies, and then you're like, because the ladder, the shifts that they have, you have your action, you have your bonuses, and you kind of figure out where you land in that spectrum of success and failure, and success with a little bit of failure or the colossal failure can all be determined by your skills, because the lowest value you ever have in a skill is 0. And if you go into a 0 skill situation against another 0 skill, you'll succeed at a small cost. And then once you start being like, oh, I'm 2 better than this guy. All right, well, you succeed with there's no downside. I am 2 better at fight than this man. Great.
I'm
done.
too better
Easy.
at fight.
I am 3 better at gun. Like, at some point you're going to sound like you don't understand how nouns work, but that's fine, because you're able to just like, you're storyboarding more than playing a game. And you're like, oh, this would be really interesting if this happens. This would be really interesting if this happens. And
so
how
like
do you...
And it is like an improv scene, honestly.
It is such a good, like, yes and no, but where's the twist? Where can I add something that narratively fits? And it's a loose enough game that someone could be like, I like it. What about X? Like,
because it always has to advance forward.
Yes, okay, I tried to open the door and I failed, but I want to succeed at great risk. Cool. The door opens not because you like hacked the panel, but because there's a giant robot on the other side who's about to walk down the hallway and he spots you. Oops, something happened. Now what do we do?
And it's just knowing. I just love it. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's like this is one of the best games for, again, professional writers have used this for making TV shows, because if you have that creative mind, you can think on your feet, or even if you can't and you just want to do this kind of by yourself and help break down the fiction and the narrative you're writing, this is a really good way to help you understand stories in any way, shape, or form, because the story is so open. There's actually 2 other books on my shelf. One is called Save the Cat, which is more about script writing than anything else. But like, okay, there's always that moment of like, it's called Save the Cat because it's that save the cat moment of like, this person is a hero because Superman like flew up and got the cat for the little old lady. They literally do it in the first 10 minutes of The Incredibles. Like, they have a literal save the cat moment. And it talks a little bit about like, okay, we know who the good guy is. How do we like, let's look at whatever creative writing you've done, this creative thing, and let's find places where we can tweak it and fix it and trim it down a little bit, so you're not just going on for pages and pages and pages. That one is less, and that's a great place to start looking for advice for storytelling just in general, is script writing books, because they tell you, cool, what's important and how do we show without telling. And aspects are kind of telling, but it is a visual reminder of a thing in this scene and how the game works. And it's a great reminder for your PCs, your NPCs, your villains,
yourself.
How do I show this thing? How do I show that this villain is compassionate towards the needy, while also him being a stone cold bastard and willing to burn down an entire city block as long as it's in the rich district? How do I show that? Without necessarily making them seem weak? How do I add in those depths and those things? And the other one is, honestly, it's called Hamlet's Hit Points. And it is a like narrative. I'm a theater guy. You say Shakespeare, I'm at least going to pay attention for the first act and a half before I take a nap. But it's called Hamlet's Hit Points, and it does a very good narrative breakdown of the typical story arc of like introduction, rising action, climax, falling action, or multiple climaxes or things like that. But it takes the story of Hamlet and lays it all out in this really easy to parse like story, and how each scene has its own mini dramatic moments that build into the larger whole. And it's such a good, useful tool for any long-running campaign, or even a short form, like a con game or a one-shot. How do I make it interesting the whole way through from a GM perspective? And what are each of these moments? what are the moments that make this thing interesting? Is it a subversion of what was expected? Were we what makes this moment exciting? Are we expecting trouble and nothing shows up? Are we expecting no trouble, or do we as the players, do we as the readers, the writers, the narrators, whatever, know there's drama in the room? Polonius standing behind the curtain and we're like, uh-oh, Hamlet's in here talking shit. What's going to happen? Spoilers, Polonius dies. But it helps, again, breaking down the narrative and understanding where conflict is and how conflict builds tension and how you can make these things work for you, because we all consume media. We all understand stories. We all love stories. That's why we play role-playing games, because we want to tell stories or hit things with a sword, which is its own kind of story. But we all recognize these things. And if you as a GM can start plucking at those strings, your players will either see where you're going and add to it, or they will completely surprise you and you'll be able to pivot with it, because you're not just like, I'm pushing the one button that says scary over and over again. And then somebody makes a funny joke. And instead of being like, no, this is a scary game, keep pushing the scary button, you take the funny and you incorporate the funny and you push the funny button a little bit. And then when you go and sort of like what you were talking about, where you need that conflict, you need that struggle, you need the music as well as the silence. And then you just hit the button again. And the next time you push the scary button, it is way worse.
Because you weren't prepared.
because you were like, oh, haha, here's this funny joke bit that suddenly either like there's a hard cut. That's what's the scene in Deep Blue Sea? I'm keep naming like 80s and 90s movies and I have no idea if you've seen them.
I honestly, I would love for just like a full list of movie recommendations from you, because like I am loving like I'm writing down during this like all the books and the things that you're referencing.
Yes, because I'm a child of like TMZ and FX and Spike. Deep Blue Sea is a movie where they basically make super intelligent sharks. It is a solid B movie, cult classic. It's kind of a horror movie. I think it's LL Cool J's in that movie. I think he's a cook. Hold on. Deep Blue Sea. Oh, it was a series. Good grief. Yeah, 1999. Stellan Skarsgård's in it. Anyway, that's not the point of the story. But Samuel L. Jackson is this diver character, and he's like, no, we're going to go out there. And, he survived this boating accident, and he like was surrounded by sharks. It's kind of a parallel to the moment in Jaws where they're talking about the USS Indianapolis. And he's standing in this underwater base, and he's standing in front of the moon pool, which is basically where submersibles can come up and come into the base because the air pressure keeps the water from flooding in. Yeah. And he's standing there and he's like, we're going to go out there and we're going to kill every single one of these. And this shark just comes up out of the moon pool and eats him and goes back into the water. And it's like, okay, here's the moment where like, it's kind of like the Predator moment where they're like, if it bleeds, it dies. We're going to go out there and kill it. And then this thing just eats him. And it is either it's like the shock of it is immediately funny and then way more terrifying, because you're like, oh, that was the guy who knew what he was doing and he's gone.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's perfect. It's absolutely great example. Yes.
It's what does that moment do for the story? What does that moment do for the characters? And why is that moment worth that time? And the downside of watching movies is especially newer ones, not a lot of movies do it well.
Yeah. Literally, I've been talking about this with a friend very recently, is just kind of the new movies not bringing anything interesting or new to stories, that even because you can have a story, that's where tropes come in, where it's like there's tropes that are commonly used. But if a movie and a story does something interesting with that trope, it's going to be interesting to watch because they do something new to it. It's going to be interesting because you've never seen it before. But if you just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, it's going to become boring and repetitive, and
Yeah.
Not engaging.
And that's I was about to name another late 90s movie that you probably haven't seen, the Doom movie with Dwayne Johnson in it. They took the video game Doom and put Dwayne Johnson in it and you're like, oh, he's the Space Marine. And you realize he's not the protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
Like halfway through the movie, and you're like, oh, this is bad. Who's the good guy? Who am I supposed to root for? And it's Carl Urban's character. But you don't realize that and then you have that trope. Everyone's looking in that direction. Mm-hmm. And then you can subvert the expectation and it's so good if you execute it properly. Mm-hmm. The trick there, and something that I have screwed up a number of times, is if you're putting in a twist, you need to set it up. And if you're going to subvert expectations, if you're going to subvert a trope, you need to pay it off. You can't just be like, oh, it's not really that. Okay, move on. Like it needs to be significant, because if you could cut that out and leave the trope as is, you're not subverting anything. You're not making a drastic sweeping change. You're just saying, oh, it's not what you thought it was. Okay, bye. And that's sort of like the end of the conversation. And having the tropes are a super good jumping off point, and finding one that is the trope is just a common language. It's this common thing that everybody bites into, and you can go, great, this guy's got a sword, this guy's got a robe, this guy's got like a deep hood and a bunch of daggers, and people will go, great, wizard, fighter, rogue, awesome. We understand this parlance and context. We can go. And you need to understand the tropes and understand what they do narratively to then take it and subvert it in a way that's like
interesting,
and make it interesting for you and the people you're playing with. Because the nice thing about role-playing games, you're not marketing it to mass media. You're not going to record this thing and publish it and put it on the internet and run for 8 years and have an Amazon TV series and whatever. Sorry, that was my out loud voice, wasn't it? But for the vast majority of us, our D&D, our role-playing game stories are not for anybody but the people we're playing with.
Mm-hmm.
So if you find it interesting and your players are on the same page, or at least interested in that same sort of thing, you can do, if you think the twist is interesting and you think you can pay it off in a way that in a way that is significant, and if you just cut out the twist, nothing changed, you need a better twist.
Mm-hmm.
Like my favorite game that I play with a friend of mine, and we can get back to Fate because I realize this has turned into a like media consumption class.
Well, honestly, again, I think these are important elements with talking about RPGs in general, is the talk of storytelling, especially with a game like Fate, where it's so heavily dependent on understanding tropes and storytelling and how to use those aspects. It is insanely valuable to hear those things. Like I said, it's valuable to hear it being talked about or like an example of it in play, because that puts your brain in a completely different perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it's like my favorite game I love playing with a friend of mine is watching a movie and going, did I need this scene? Mm-hmm. What did this scene accomplish for the movie? Mm-hmm. And you're like, did this do anything for me? Was this just a comedic bit? Did nothing for the plot? Great, cut it out. Let's move forward. Mm-hmm. You can do so much of that, but also you can also see where cutting out a scene tells a completely different, like changes the story in a significant way. There are cuts of the first 3 Star Wars movies. And by first 3, I mean episode 1, 2, and 3. The prequel trilogy, that you take all 9+ hours of that movie and you cut out a lot of the bullshit. And you are left with this 4.5 hour long ass movie about Anakin Skywalker and his journey. Mm-hmm. And it cuts out a lot of like the politics stuff and a lot of the stuff about the separatists and all of the larger war story to focus in on Anakin and the people in his orbit, because that's what the prequel trilogy is honestly there to do. It is to tee up. Yes, there's a big global conflict or intergalactic conflict. Yes, there's all of this, but that's not what we care about in this version of the story. We care about Anakin and his growth and his rise and his fall. And it changes the way, if you watch those movies and then go watch the original trilogy, it changes your perspective on Vader in a much more profound way than just watching all 6 movies in a row. Because it is so focused on, this is the person whose journey this is, and these are the journeys of the people around him. And why, yes, their journeys, and there are scenes that don't involve Anakin, but that's because they are important to the characters that are around him. And how does that shift our understanding of those characters from our perspective, from the character's own perspective, and from Anakin's perspective? And what does that do in the sort of condensed but like stretched out like taffy into just this long one thread? We're not jumping across the galaxy. We're not watching CGI clone troopers shoot CGI droids. We're watching Anakin grow up, fall in love, realize that he will do anything to protect it, make really, really poor choices, and fall in a way that not like, honestly, Anakin's story makes a really, really good fallen paladin story in a D&D, like in a fantasy setting. Like it's so good. And most of the time your players will guess unless you tweak the right details without losing the core thread of that.
Absolutely.
And that's where you start stealing things. Because
as one should.
Unless you're a professional, right? Like, yeah, no, 100%. File off the serial numbers and be like, here you go. And 9 times out of 10, people won't notice. And the people that do, you don't let them know that they're onto you.
just avoid all the questions and just continue playing.
Just smile and roll a couple of dice and go, anyway. Where was I?
Yeah.
Watch him sweat.
But yes, I think we're getting to the end of the episode, though. And again, absolutely, just the discussion on storytelling. I love when you come on and talk about it, because it just blows my mind and I start thinking about all kinds of stuff.
I am chock full of 80s and 90s movie references. I am chock full of really good and really bad stories. And I've screwed up more role-playing games than I would care to admit. So I am always happy to come on and talk about the things that I have taken and used well and taken and used poorly.
Absolutely. But yeah, I think the last kind of bit, if this can be kind of shorter, I would love if you would talk about maybe like 3 pieces of advice that you would have to any GM that is wanting to approach the Fate core system and run it for a group of players.
Set boundaries. Number 1, set boundaries. Find like, hey, this takes place in a small town. This takes place like when you're talking about the world in the game. Set a couple of boundaries, not related, like always set session 0 personal player boundaries. Set boundaries in the world, in the sandbox you're about to play in, because there is a lot of information in Fate, and it is a lot to chew through. And if you say you can do whatever you want, your players will come back with some wild things. Set boundaries, and part of that comes with the idea for the world, right? Are we globe hopping? Are we doing like the Justice League and we're just going to hang out in Metropolis? Are we doing Young Justice and we're going to hang out in Metropolis? Or do we get, how big is the sandpit we get to play in? Figure that out, and it will save you a lot of heartache and headache trying to make these things fit together.
Yeah, this is really hitting home personally with a campaign, like my first campaign. I've only been actually GMing for like a little over a year now. In my first campaign, I have struggled with this exact thing. Please set the boundaries. Please talk about how big of a story you want. Talk about what is the goal.
Yeah, and that is a discussion about like, and that boundary is like, we are playing like that this is the world. So that's partly setting the scope. That's also partly setting like the player expectation of what's going to happen. Number 2 is like be flexible, be willing to don't be so like locked in with any of this. The whole point of this is everything is very flexible. Everything is moving. All of your players are going to be throwing out ideas. Being flexible, but also staying within those boundaries. Because the dice are not an arbiter of whether or not something happens. Most of the time, you can fudge that a little bit and cause failures to be positive, but you don't get to say this is how it's going to happen. Like D&D, sometimes you'll have like this is a cutscene thing where like you've all been imprisoned and you're carried from one cell to the other, and there's always a player who's like, I want to try and break free, and you have to be like, yeah, you try to break free, the guard sees you, punches you in the back of the head, knock it off. You guys need to get to the prison cell for the game to start. You will not have moments like that during Fate. Fate is far too collaborative, and you all need to be willing to bend with each other to really help support and grow this thing. And I think the last
perfect.
Yeah. And the last piece of advice for playing Fate. It is not just about you.
There you go. Yeah.
I think that is a, and again, look, that's an aspect of this game. It's not just about you. Like it's you're not saying this is the law. You're saying this is part of it. This is the face of the rule that you have just bumped up against. Gravity is an aspect. You can use it to your advantage. It can be used against you, but it is part of this thing that you've made. And finding it's not just about you. It's more about keeping the players rolling. Everything is cooperative. Everything builds off of everything else. And as long as you stay within the boundaries that you've made, and also you can say no. No is more important than yes. Knowing, and that's where the boundaries help. Because you go, no, like someone's like, I pull out a laser pistol. Be like, where'd you get a laser pistol? Like, why do you have that? No one has brought up a laser pistol. Put it away. And you're not, you're not arbitrating the game. You are running a writer's room and just letting the ideas flow and percolate and go. And every once in a while you step in and snip a couple of things and you add complications and you want, and other players, something we kind of talked about, other players can compel too and push each other's buttons and like let each other play. And it's not just about you, but it is all about respect.
Yes.
Absolutely. And yes, I think I'm going to keep rambling while I keep adding things to that sentence. Honestly, yeah, just respect everybody. Everyone at the table gets equal respect. That is my third piece of advice for the fourth time.
Absolutely. Everyone gets equal respect, and all of you are just playing a game. You're all playing a game together. Even the GM is a player, just with a different role in the game. Just all have fun.
A different set of tools.
Exactly. But I think that is honestly a great way to end this episode. Like,
yes.
Fate is a sandbox. It is a sandbox that goes on for infinity, and it is just up to you when you sit down and say you want to play this game, figuring out where you want your sandbox to take place within this much larger one that you are basically working with.
And every game of Fate will teach you something different about yourself, about your players, about how you run, about stories in general. Every game of Fate will teach you something different.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. And I just want to say thank you so much, Curtis, for coming on again. This was fantastic.
Yeah, thank you for having me back on. We did break the 2-hour mark, and I was like, no, I'm going to stay under it. But we got snuck past me again.
Just a little over.
Too many movie references. I knew I made a mistake. But no, thank you so much for having me on again. It's been an absolute blast.
I'm so glad. And thank you, everyone who has listened to this episode. It means a whole lot. And yeah, that is the end. And that is the end of the episode. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and I really hope that you enjoyed it. It was super fun to record, and yeah. If you did like this episode, I would really appreciate it if you decided to follow the RPG Goblin on your preferred podcast platform and give us a review. Any little bit of support counts and is always appreciated. Thank you so much again to Curtis for coming on and talking about Fate with me. It was such a great experience, and I'm so ready to play Fate. The next episode of the RPG Goblin is going to be coming out Friday, April 7th, and it's going to be about a indie RPG called Definitely Wizards. And oh, I am so excited to share this game with you. So, thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.